Good morning, Andy.
Hey, thanks for taking time to talk with me because we're really excited about your concert at St. Cecilia Music Center this coming Thursday. That's going to be a great night.
I'm really looking forward to it, too. It's the beginning of a little Midwest tour I'm doing.
Okay, my wife and I saw you, I think it was a couple of summers ago at Saugatuck, the Center for Performing Arts. And that's such a great venue because it's so intimate, and St. Cecilia is an intimate venue as well. So it's really like sitting in your living room, and it was so much fun. So I can just imagine what Thursday night's going to be like.
I remember that venue, Saugatuck. I love it there. I try to make any concert I do, whether it's in front of a few hundred people or a couple of thousand, an intimate experience. I always loved it when I went to shows, and I felt like I got something out of the live performance that a record wouldn't convey.
Right.
So I'm always looking for something new to happen in the moment. A lot of that is, about the audience and what mood they're in and what they want to hear.
Sure.
I even take requests. So it's a pretty freewheeling affair with me on stage.
You have a lineup of one song, and then the rest are requests, then.
Exactly. That's right. I've got a set list of 3 tunes. The rest is up to you.
It'll be a lot of fun. I can't wait for that. I understand that you've added an organ to the two of you now, so you've added a third piece.
Well, yeah. I do different shows with different backup.
Okay.
Sometimes I perform with a full band. Sometimes it's just a duo. But I have been really loving playing with a particular trio now for the last several months. It's a great percussionist who played with Sting for the last couple of years named Joe Bonadio.
Wow.
And the organ player, keyboard player, and singer who sings background as well is a man named Glenn Pacha, who played with Levon Helm for years and Sheryl Crow.
Sure.
That particular formation I love. They cover everything I need for these songs.
Yeah, that's going to be great. Can't wait for that. Thursday night, St. Cecilia, and you can still get tickets. Let's take me back a little bit. Let's go back to Cleveland, Ohio. And here's a kid growing up in the Beechwood High School. You're writing music in junior high. You're writing music. Were you in a musical family?
Well, that's yes and no. A lot of people in my family were musical, but nobody until I came along was foolish enough to decide to make it a career. But I had an older brother who unfortunately and sadly passed away a couple of years ago, but he was an incredible piano player. I mean, really great. Very influenced by Ray Charles and Jimmy Smith on organ. I mean, he could really play. So that was something I heard around my house all the time.
Okay.
And my dad, who was a pharmacist, was also a really good singer. So he was always singing. And then I had a grandfather who was a poet. It wasn't his living, but he was really good with lyrics.
Wow.
So I sort of got the combination from the gene pool of all of that and took it and ran with it.
You really did. I mean, your lyrics... the lyrics are very meaningful in almost all of your songs, and you've been doing this for a long time. Back in junior high, did you feel like I'm writing some hit songs here?
No, no. I mean, I wanted to learn how, right? That was the world I wanted to inhabit. I grew up loving, AM pop radio and Motown and Burt Bacharach and Dionne Warwick, but also when I started hearing people like Van Morrison and Jackson Browne, I thought, which are very lyric-centric songwriters, right? I mean, without the personal nature of their lyrics, there wouldn't have been much to set them apart. They were, the music was phenomenal, but it was what they were saying, and that was the thing I was immediately drawn to in the songwriters I loved, and the thing that I focused on the most as I started my journey as a songwriter.
Yeah.
Lyrics are, for me, the crucial key to what gets me engaged in a song. If I've got a great chord progression, that's terrific. But without the words, to me, the song doesn't give me anything.
Well, eventually, you were in New York and you were demoing songs for guys like Jimmy Webb and Lieber and Mike Stoller. You're working with some of the best.
Yeah, that was an amazing time for me. Yeah, I was very lucky. I got into this very select group by sending a demo of mine around to a few people where I was singing my own songs. And I was looking for a record deal, but other things happened before that came along. And one of those great things was being able to sing demos for a few of the best songwriters that have ever lived. So I learned a lot from doing that, for sure.
Yeah, for sure. You got to tell me about, though, the Supreme Court, the 14-piece cover band that you played for Caroline Kennedy's wedding?
Yeah, that was our last show. We were a group really of studio musicians who were looking to still stay connected to what it felt like to play the music we loved, as opposed to, jingles, which a lot of the guys did, and I did for a while too. Ultimately, that's not that gratifying. It pays well, which is wonderful as a musician.
Sure.
But these guys were aching to play live, and I hadn't been in the scene very long, so playing live was all I really had been doing for several years out in California. But when I came here and started to get some work in studios, I met some really talented people, and we put together this band, a 5-piece horn section, 2 guitars, 2 keyboard players, great arrangers. Some of them have done quite well over the years. And we performed, several gigs at places in New York City. There weren't many stages that could hold us all. There were so many of them. But we played maybe a dozen gigs over a year. We weren't able to play that many gigs.
Sure.
But the last gig we got was through Carly Simon, who came to hear us at a place called the China Club, and she was friendly with the Kennedys and recommended us to Caroline. And to make a very long story short, we had the most magnificent, magical day playing behind Carly and then doing our own set at Caroline's wedding.
Doesn't that?
And over the years, Caroline kept in touch with me, and I even got a thank you note from Jackie Onassis. It was really and this is way before I had a name or a record out. So it was pretty, up to that point, it was one of the greatest musical experiences I'd ever had.
You maybe thought, okay, time to retire. I've hit the
we
pinnacle.
Did. I mean, that to me was actually the beginning of realizing, you know what, I love this band, but it was mostly these great arrangements of other people's music. And the thing I always knew I wanted to do was my music.
Yeah.
So I knew, that was when I kind of walked away and the band broke apart. Everybody went on to doing great things. But I finally got on the road to the career I had always dreamed of.
What a fabulous time. Marc Cohn is my guest, singer-songwriter, going to be at St. Cecilia this Thursday night at 7:30 for a great concert. So life goes on, and all of a sudden you get this record deal with Atlantic Records in the early 90s, and all of a sudden your career blows up. It just goes crazy.
It was great. It was an amazing time. Nobody had, I was very grateful and happy to finally, after all my efforts over the years, to get a record deal with a major label. Back then, that was the end-all and be-all, right? If you didn't get a record deal, unlike today, there weren't many ways you could get your music heard.
Exactly.
So getting signed was an enormous thing for me. And, everybody was like, listen, we love your record. We'll do the best we can pushing it. And then, to the surprise of everybody, including me, the record went platinum and won a Grammy, and Walking in Memphis and True Companion became, really important songs in my life and in a lot of other people's lives. So I'm very grateful. It's 25 years last year that record came out, and those songs seem to still have some power for people. So I'm very grateful for the whole journey.
They really had legs, and that's really significant in itself. But was it difficult? I mean, you get this record deal, and boom, your first album goes crazy, and then you get the Walking in Memphis, that goes crazy. You're getting Grammy Awards, your Best New Artist, and that's early. You were one hit, or not one hit, an overnight sensation. You'd paid your dues to get there, and yet all of a sudden your first one hits. Is that hard on your career then?
Well, not really. I mean, it's mostly just terrific. It's what everybody wants, right? The hard part is, how do you continue to do that?
Right.
To have hits, which is what the record company wants. And, of course, I had nothing against having more hits either. But, that's not something you can totally control. So what I learned on my second record, better that I learned it earlier than later, I guess, was that, hey, everything I do isn't going to be a hit. It isn't going to resonate for the largest number of people possible. Maybe my audience won't keep growing. Maybe I'll just have a nice following that stays about the same. You never know. Everybody's career is different.
Right.
So I learned something even more important than that, which is, on my second record, which sold about a quarter of the copies that the first one did, it was commercially disappointing for me and for the record company. But artistically, it's my favorite record that I've made, and I've made 5 or 6. So I learned that I just have to stay true to my journey as an artist, hope that I find the record companies and the people that will support that journey, and keep playing. That's really what I focused on. I mean, listen, I would have loved to have had 10 hits as big as Walking in Memphis.
Sure.
But that didn't happen. Do I feel like I wrote 10 or 15 songs just as good as Walking in Memphis? I do. So that's the part I'm proud of.
Right.
I feel good about the work, whether it made it onto the radio or not.
Well, I'm going to have to drag Rainy Season out because we have that at home. And
man. I've listened to that a couple times over the last couple of years, and it's funny. A lot of my fans, really, the ones that come to the shows, they really want to hear songs from that record almost as much as the debut.
Wow.
So it has Bonnie Raitt on it and David Crosby and Graham Nash. It's really a beautiful record with kind of a all-star band. Jim Keltner, Ben Montench from the Heartbreakers. It's a really cool record.
Just a few minor celebrities as a singer.
That's right, exactly. I couldn't get the good guys.
So you tour extensively in the 90s, and you're selling records, and you get your albums. But all of a sudden, you go quiet for a while. What happened there? What went on?
Well, a lot of things. I mean, and actually, I've gone quiet a couple of times over the last 25 years. Very often it was related to just personal stuff, getting divorced, which was really, really difficult, and being a father and wanting to be present for my kids while there was a crisis going on. So, there was a long stretch of time where I felt my job was to be present for my children.
Well, that's pretty cool.
Not on the road.
Yeah, that's cool.
And, I paid a price for that career-wise, I think, probably, although I'm still very lucky that I can tour and people show up.
Yeah.
I'm very grateful for that. But, most of it had to do with prioritizing the fact that I was a father and didn't feel like it was fair while there was a lot of chaos and tumult and sadness to be on a tour bus thousands of miles away.
Yeah.
So I chose to be with them. That's a big part of why people didn't hear from me for a long time.
That's really cool. You came back, though, and then you go through an incredibly, I didn't even know this story, a traumatic time when you are shot in the head during an attempted carjacking.
Yeah, did your homework.
Yeah, that was. I mean, I can't even fathom that. What happened?
I'm with you.
Yeah.
Man. I mean, it happened to me, and I still can't fathom it. It's now about 11 years ago. It happened after a show in Denver, a place that I've always loved playing and still do. And it was just I was in the wrong place at the wrong time. We were in our car, in our van with the band, my tour manager, going back to the hotel after the show, and a guy high on crystal meth, I think it was, needed to get out of town fast, and he was really trying. It was an attempted carjacking, and police were already following him because of some other stuff he had done before he got to our van. But he literally stood in the middle of the street, shot through the windshield, trying to kill the driver, my tour manager, and glass went flying everywhere, and a bullet ended up in my left temple.
Jeez.
And unbelievably, I not only survived, I was let out of the hospital the next day. I was awake and conscious while they took the bullet out. It was a weird, scary, traumatizing, but ultimately very life-affirming experience.
That had, life-affirming for sure. I know the police or the doctors said you were the unluckiest guy they had met in a long time.
When they get calls, when the police get calls that there's been a murder, a victim with a headshot, with a gunshot wound to the head, they usually find a dead man.
Right.
And I could have been that if it weren't for another centimeter that this bullet stopped, because it was a .22 and went through a windshield. Yeah. It stopped just a centimeter short of my skull and rested in the soft tissue between the outside of your face and your skull. And but there was a hole, literally a visible hole in my head.
Jeez.
It was really, I don't know. I still, over all the years, tried to kind of understand why that happened, because it was such an unlucky incident, but I was so lucky to just basically walk away.
But you can't walk away from that mentally.
No, that took a while. That took a while to work through some of the post-traumatic stress. You know, I definitely had some of that and went for counseling to specifically get me through that, and it worked.
Well, then you got back on the road, and you've been producing ever since, and lots of concerts and stuff.
Yep, I've been traveling more than ever. I do about 100 shows a year, sometimes more, and I really feel proud of the work I've done since then.
You should, yeah, absolutely you should. Marc Cohn is my special guest, and he'll be at St. Cecilia this Thursday for a great concert, 7:30 at night. I do want to talk about Elizabeth. Elizabeth Vargas is, of course, ABC News journalist, and the big story of her. You two were married for, what, 12 years or so?
We were together for 12. I don't think we were married for that long. Maybe 9 or 10.
Yeah. And she's gone through a really tough time. That had just an amazing toll on your marriage, obviously. Yeah. She's written a well-publicized book now, has talked about it on TV a lot. And we're, and People Magazine, and she's doing well and hopefully continues to do well. But we've heard her story, but that had to take a great toll on you as well.
It did. Alcoholism is, Elizabeth would be the first one to recognize and acknowledge. It's a insidious family disease. Everyone's impacted by it. I did the best I could, to help. It was, years of a lot of struggle, and of course she was very ashamed of it. So there were years where I kind of, at her request, didn't tell anybody, right? Mm-hmm. It takes you a while to learn as the partner what you're actually supposed to do to help. It's a long learning curve, and it's such a scary, scary disease. So I'd never really been confronted with anything quite like that. And ultimately we have 2 amazing boys. She is doing great. I'm really, really proud of her. And she is back being the great mom that she always had been. And I'm just so happy for my boys that they have her back. Yeah. But unfortunately, the one thing that got sacrificed was our relationship. That couldn't weather the storm. And that's a long story that, you never know what's going on between 2 people, right? Unless you're one of them. So it's a personal, sad series of things that led to that. And it wasn't all just the alcohol at all, as people might think, but that didn't help.
Obviously, that didn't help. Yeah. And the pressure of 2 people in showbiz. There's enough pressure with that alone. Yeah. Yeah, listen, I mean, marriage is hard. Relationships are hard. But, if you're meant to be together, you weather these storms. And there was just a lot between Elizabeth and me that obviously we weren't meant to weather all the storms that we had. And that one was a big one. Yeah. That was a big one. The kids are doing well?
They're doing great. I'm knocking on wood. I have 2 older kids from a prior marriage, right. And Elizabeth and I have a 14-year-old and a 10-year-old, and they're all doing just beautifully. I'm so lucky. I have a brother who told me a long time ago, you're only ever as happy as your unhappiest child, which I thought was an interesting thing to say.
It really is.
If one of your kids isn't doing well, you're not doing well. And I'm happy to say that's not the case. All my kids are healthy and happy and thriving. That's one of the great blessings of my life.
And hopefully you and Elizabeth have been able to weather some of that and remain friends at the same time.
I have to say, I think, aside from everything else, the way we co-parent, despite the fact that we're not together, I'm really proud of us. We do a really good job together.
That is great.
Mark, and that only benefits the kids.
Yeah, absolutely. Kids are number one.
Divorce is hard enough. They don't need to be put in the middle of the aftermath.
No.
Right? So we do a great job together.
That's fantastic to hear. Marc Cohn.
Yes.
All right, what's next for you then? Obviously you're touring, but what's going on?
I've had a really phenomenal year, unlike any other, as a songwriter for other people. So there's a great soul singer named William Bell who had many hits on Stax Records back in the 60s. He wrote Born Under a Bad Sign and You Don't Miss Your Water and all these great soul songs. anyway, to make a long story short, he came back with a comeback record a friend of mine produced. I co-wrote 5 of the songs on the record, and it just won a Grammy for Best Americana Album of the Year.
Fantastic.
So that happened a couple months ago. My friend John Leventhal and I just wrote 3 songs for the gospel group, the Blind Boys of Alabama. That's going to be on their next record. I just wrote a song with David Crosby. That's on his new record. And I'm about to start my next record and already have 3 or 4 songs for that with a brand new record deal. And things are really moving and cooking, and it feels great.
And you had time for all of that. That's amazing in itself.
I did. Well, I've learned also everything goes in cycles. So songwriting for me is something I never can predict when the songs are going to come. But the idea of starting to write for other people was very liberating for me. And I felt freer to sort of write about whatever I wanted. It didn't have to be personal. It didn't, for me, it had to work for them as artists. So that was a very liberating experience. And I know that once you start writing, you got to go with it because it may not last. I may write a couple of songs, write for 2 or 3 weeks, and then not have an idea for a year. So when the inspiration comes, I let it take me wherever it wants for as long as it lasts.
We're going to have a lot of inspiration Thursday night at St. Cecilia, and feel free to just keep playing for a long time, okay?
Okay, man.
It'll be a great concert. And by the way, there'll be a reception afterwards, so you get a chance to meet Marc and pick up some CDs as well. Marc Cohn. Marc, I can't thank you enough. It's been a real, true pleasure. Looking forward to seeing you Thursday night.
Likewise. Thank you so much.